You ever wonder what your houseplants would say if they could actually talk? I mean, really talk? Well, today we're going to find out. In this explainer, we're diving into a story told from the perspective of a peace lily, and it reveals the silent and super misunderstood crisis of overwatering. Wow. I mean, that quote, it gets right to the heart of the problem for so many of us plant owners, doesn't it? Our best intentions can sometimes lead to the absolute worst outcomes. So, come on, let's open this plant's diary and see what it has to tell us, chapter by chapter. All right, chapter 1. The story of overwatering. It doesn't start where you'd think. It's not with that first yellow leaf you spot or drooping stem. Nope. It all begins way deeper, totally hidden from view, down in the soil itself. And this is a huge misunderstanding for so many of us. We tend to think of roots as just, straws for sucking up water. But there's so much more than that. They're actually breathing. Just like you and me, they need oxygen to function, to stay alive and healthy. And right there, that's the core problem. When you water too much, all that water just floods the soil. It pushes out all the air, filling up every single tiny pocket. For the roots, it's literally like being held underwater. They can't breathe, they start to suffocate. Okay, so the crisis is happening underground. How does the plant even begin to signal for help? Well, this is where it gets tricky, because the very first signs, they're often the most confusing ones. Basically, the plant starts to panic. Its roots are suffocating, they can't send up nutrients and water like they're supposed to, so to conserve energy, it starts sacrificing its oldest leaves, the ones at the bottom. That's why they turn yellow. But the really baffling part? The wilting. And what's your first instinct when you see a wilted plant? Water it more, right? But that is the absolute last thing it needs. And that right there, that is the cruel paradox of overwatering. The plant looks thirsty. I mean, it's drooping like it hasn't had a drink in weeks, but it's sitting in a pool of water. So what on earth is actually going on here? Okay, here's the key difference. A genuinely thirsty plant has perfectly healthy, working roots. It just needs water. Simple. But with root failure, the roots are so damaged, so starved of oxygen, that they physically cannot absorb the water that's all around them. The plant is wilting because its entire life support system is shutting down. And believe it or not, it gets worse. When those roots are left sitting in that suffocating, waterlogged soil for too long, something else, something far more sinister, starts to emerge. And here is the main villain of our story, root rot. Now, the weird thing is, these fungi, they're always in the soil. But in healthy, airy soil, they're totally harmless. It's the lack of oxygen from all that water that creates the perfect storm, giving them the green light to attack those already weakened roots. And this chain reaction can happen devastatingly fast. First, the suffocation weakens the roots. Then, the pathogens see their chance and they move in. Pretty soon, the roots just start to decompose. They go from being firm and white to this dark, mushy, gross mess. At this point, the plant's entire foundation is literally rotting away from underneath it. So as the roots fail, the whole structure of the plant just starts to go. The leaves get limp, the stems feel soft at the base. All that firmness is gone. Why? Because the plant's internal plumbing system, the thing that keeps it standing tall, is completely broken. The collapse isn't just something you see, you can actually feel it. And this is where we get to a really scary stage, the point of no return. The damage isn't just a root problem anymore. No, it's become a total system failure. And the signs? Well, they become much, much more alarming. These are the big, flashing red alerts. The rot is literally climbing up from the roots into the base of the plant and even the leaves. The whole thing just looks sickly. And if you dared to pull it out of the pot to check, you wouldn't find a nice, firm root ball. You just find a soggy, falling apart disaster. But then there's maybe the most powerful clue of all, the smell. Yeah, seriously. If you get close to the soil and you smell something off, something foul, musty, or just plain rotten, that is the unmistakable smell of decay. It's a direct signal that the life support system under the soil is either dead or very close to it. Now, let's say the plant has somehow managed to hang on through all of that. It has one last long-term signal it sends out. It's a quiet admission, really, that it's in a state of constant chronic stress. Think about it. Flowering takes a ton of energy. It's something a plant does when it's feeling good, when it's healthy and has resources to spare. But a plant that's fighting for its life against root rot, it just can't afford that kind of luxury. And that really is the core of this final plea. No flowers means the plant is not thriving. It's shifted every last bit of its energy away from growing and making flowers and into one single mission, just trying to stay alive. It is, just like the diary says, a quiet, desperate cry for help. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that we have to look beyond just, are the leaves green? The real story of a plant's health is told in so many ways. The color of its oldest leaves, the way it holds itself, the smell of the soil, and whether or not it decides to bloom. And all this forces us to ask a much better question, and not just about our plants, right? Is it just surviving, or is it truly thriving?